Good evening, everybody. Good evening. How y'all doing? It's nice to see you. Some of you again this week, which is a joy. My name's Aaron. I work on programming and engagement for Hanshaw Auditorium and the Office of Performing Arts and Engagement here at the University of Iowa. Thanks first to the Stanley Museum of Art for hosting, then to the Trisha Brown Dance Company for their week-long residency, and then thanks also to our panelists for joining us. Tonight's panel, Restaging Trisha Brown and Merce Cunningham in collaboration with Robert Rauschenberg, brings together a few threads that have been running through our campus this week. One thread centers on Robert Rauschenberg. It's his centenary and his remarkable collaboration, and the thread is his remarkable collaborations with Trisha Brown and Merce Cunningham, both iconic choreographers. Tomorrow night at Hanshaw, we'll see works by both featuring Rauschenberg sets and costumes and made by Brown and Cunningham. Representing that thread are Carolyn Lucas, the Associate Artistic Director of the Trisha Brown Dance Company, who joined the company as a dancer in 1984, and Andrea Weber, the Associate Director of Licensing for the Merce Cunningham Trust, who danced with the Cunningham Company, started dancing with the Cunningham Company in 2004. The second thread is local to us. We're fortunate to have two former Trisha Brown dancers on our faculty who have helped make this residency so meaningful. Professor Mindy Myers joined the Brown Company in 2006 and has staged Foray Foray, another Brown-Rauschenberg collaboration on our student dancers, and you'll see that tomorrow night. And Professor Tony Orrico, who also joined the company in 2006, has staged Floor of the Forest, which has been on view all week in the Visual Arts Building atrium, and tomorrow is the last day you can see it. It shows at 12:40 and 2:10. Together, these threads set the stage for tonight's conversation. Before introducing our moderator, I'll mention one other thing, which is a terrific aspect of a university that has a terrific art museum with a terrific art collection, which is that the Stanley has pulled out 4 Robert Rauschenberg prints, which are on view on the third floor, in the third floor teaching gallery. And you're welcome to go see them. The museum is open until 8, and they're quite stunning. I think ranging from the mid 70s to the to mid 90s. So those are great to see. And to guide us in the conversation today, we're joined by Christopher-Rasheem McMillan, artist, scholar, and associate professor in dance and gender, women's, and sexuality studies here at the University of Iowa, whose work bridges performance theory and the archive. Please join me in welcoming Carolyn, Andrea, Mindy, Tony, and Chris.
I feel so thrilled because all the things I love happen to be gathered here on this couch, representative of all the things I love. I have some questions for all of us, and hopefully you go where the spirit leads you. And if my questions are leading us in a different direction and you feel going to a different place, please, by all means, steer us in the way in which you'd like to go. The questions today branch across legacy, process, and even the future of dance, more so. I guess we could start off by saying, could each of you share a formative memory or experience of working with either Trisha Brown or Merce Cunningham, and what is the one moment that has stayed with you and continues to inform your work today? It's a big question, so I'll just break it down again. Could each of you share a formative experience of working with either Trisha or Merce, and of this experience, how has this moment stayed with you and informs your work today? Who wants to answer that?
I think I'm just going to start with the first thing that came to my mind. So as soon as you asked, I just had the wonderful experience of performing or dancing with Trisha on stage. And the look, I mean, the look in her eye, like when you were dancing with her, she would just look you right in the pupils. And it was something that was so adventurous and like so on, so on the edge and so, I don't know, there's a real engagement, total engagement in performing and dancing. So it just came to me from a performance point of view, but I'll always remember that. So.
Thank you. Right on.
Merce didn't give a lot of feedback. So actually the first thing I thought of was the space in the studio running pieces in silence with just the clock. I almost preferred over performing the work on stage, that sort of time with Merce, even though there wasn't a lot of feedback. And there was one time where he just, we ran Suite for Five. It was just 5 of us, and he just said thank you, which was very special. And then also with that same work, there was one time all he said to us was, it's just like taking one step in front of the other. And that was the only feedback we got in the piece. And so it's hard to stage the work and not give too much feedback, but I try to remind myself that you can give the material to the dancers and let them have space for a while, and you don't need to micromanage them. It's tough. I don't always do it, but actually I was just thinking about this a couple nights ago, rehearsing some students at NYU, that it's okay for them to try to figure it out for a while. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Wow, I love this. That's beautiful. What came to my mind immediately was I was invited unexpectedly to come into the studio with Trisha. And before that, I was learning repertory from current dancers in the company, and I had shared space with Trisha, but I hadn't been invited to be in her creative presence until this moment. And she and I and another dancer were in the room, and I didn't know what to expect exactly. And she started moving, and then I followed. And then after we tried a few rounds of what she made, she looked at me and asked me to move on. And I went for it. I just did the next thing that I could even imagine in my body. Couldn't think fast enough. It just, whatever felt right. And that had never happened to me before in the studio with a choreographer, and certainly not someone like Trisha Brown. And so I guess what I took away from that moment was that I wasn't prepared fully for that, but I leaned into it anyway. And I was actually really nervous about it, but I leaned into it anyway, and I did it anyway. And that felt really brave and really sort of profound, even though it was small. And I think the lesson there just keeps coming to me all the time. Like, lean into it anyway. You don't know what's happening, but lean into it anyway. So, and also just watching her move. And at that point, I mean, that was 2006, so that was not the beginning. It was the middle, closer to the end. And so still, she just full body, full presence, full expectation all the time.
I was going to go with my first choice as well, and now I'm on to my sixth because I'm really influenced. I'm in, we're in Montpellier on a tour, and Trisha was traveling with us on this tour, and we had a nice dinner with most of the company outdoors, and then there's like a large sort of central brick laid area in the center of the city, and we were just dancing together with Trisha, twirling her around like under the moonlight, and it was probably the most romantic connection that we all were cherishing simultaneously. But it does make me think about just how approachable and how human Trisha is, and she's such a storyteller. She loved to talk about her childhood and her brother, and she would reference this in her work with us. But it was just nice just to be not in the studio and to be people together and to be laughing and playing.
Thank y'all. That was really beautiful. I have some specific questions, and if you need to pass, feel free. Carolyn, you've been with the Trisha Brown Company since 1984, moving from dancer to choreographic assistant, associate artistic director. How has your understanding of Trisha's work evolved as your role within the company has changed?
First, I'll just say, so it's not so specific, but it's 42 years in, and I still am learning from the work. Like, it's incredible. So I really, I feel so lucky to have worked with Trisha when she was creating some of the first piece I did with Trisha was Newark, which was really an amazing thing to go through. It has a lot of aerial partnering in it, and it was like a shift into the really like athletic cycle that she explored. But she gave the most amazing directions, and they were so well thought out, but also engaged the dancer's instinct. So she would just give them the wildest idea, like, Lance, like, toss Carolyn out like a door, let her drop on the ground, and then Diane back up into the space, bent over, and now you're going to do the door again. Carolyn, you're going to land on Diane. Then you're going to catapult into an arc, and Randy's going to catch you, and you're going to run down out of the sky. And we would just do it, It was so amazing. So I had, like, really the most amazing time as a dancer in the company. And I made a transition after an accident in the ice. I couldn't continue like dancing 8 hours a day. But I have been working with Trisha on a solo that she was creating called If You Couldn't See Me. And she had asked me to come into the studio and switch places. And it was in the middle of this that I had the fall in the ice. But we had developed this really beautiful relationship about, she was really interested in memorizing improvisation. And on the outside, I was like, oh my God, what happened to your body when you weren't thinking? So we hit it off. And so I became a choreographic assistant. And one of the things that was really beautiful about that was stepping out and knowing what it felt like to be a dancer, but also to try to be as objective as possible about what Trisha was working on. Like, be there if needed, but not interfere. Also support the dancers the best that I could. So that was a beautiful growth process. And that also helped me learn how to be more of a director. And now I'm an associate artistic director, but it's all the same. And I just keep learning and learning and learning. So it's great.
It seems like when they said choreographic assistant, they might have meant like dramaturg or something, because it sounds like you were doing much more than just assisting. It sounds like you were just like a linchpin to the whole process.
It could have been a bit like reviewing materials with Trisha, but also like a rehearsal director for the new work that was being made. And there was also a rehearsal director for the repertory. And so it just was that title, but we would sometimes just see the same sparks fly in the studio. Like, both our heads would be like, whoa, you know, simultaneously. So, yeah.
Right on. Thank you. Andrea, as a former dancer with Merce Cunningham's company and now the Associate Director of Licensing at the Trust, how do you navigate the dual perspective of having the work in your body versus managing its life and legacy institutionally? I can do that again.
No,
Okay.
that's okay. I'll take a stab and see. I'm just entering this role to license the work. So I'm sort of in an interim year and will take over licensing the work in January full time. So I've learned a lot this year of what this means to like carry the legacy forward and Merce's steps forward. Especially because there's no dance company. So let me just backtrack a little bit. I've been very, very, very fortunate to get to stage the work since the company closed. So I was in the last group of dancers with the company, and then the company closed, no more Merce Cunningham Dance Company, and I've been staging the work since. And that space of seeing the work, not in my own body, but in the perspective of other dancers, and mostly dancers who have not been trained in the Cunningham technique, the Cunningham language, has been the great joy of my career so far. I've just loved this space of being able to translate the work. And so I believe in that profoundly. Like, I think that the technique and Merce's work carries on because of who Merce was, what it is, and that it still is a challenge for people. So how I'll move that forward in the organization, it stresses me out.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes I'm like, oh wow, this is like, not only am I stepping into big shoes, but this is a big task, but one that I'm passionate about. So I might have more information about that in 6 months or another year. But I love to see what the work, how it transfers into other bodies, and then the difference it makes in those dancers to have been inside the work. For me, that's been more informative than me being in the work. So.
Thank you for that. I really love that answer, though. I mean, and also you have it in your body and you're teaching it, so it's multiple ways in which I can imagine the legacy goes forward.
I mean, I think it's the steps. So.
It's the steps. All right. Melinda and Tony, you were both in the original cast of I Love My Robots. What is it like to move from being the originator of a role to being custodians of choreography or teaching it to the next generation of dancers, moreover?
Yeah, we were just talking about I Love My Robots this morning, and Carolyn was in the role you were describing when we were making that work. I think it is and was a very different process making something new with Trisha versus learning repertory in the sort of responsibility to the moment, learning from these incredible people who created their own roles and pieces before me, and then trying to emulate and embody their essence while still being true to myself is a really fun challenge, a challenging challenge. But then being in the moment and creating something new is also just as challenging, because it's like, we got to grab it once we know it, and then I have to repeat it, and then it's making its own mark as a choreography over time. And so I think what's coming to mind more than I Love My Robots is when I came to visit to do L'Amour, and that hadn't been restaged yet, right? Since that time hadn't been restaged.
You were the first to help out.
Oh, I was the first to help out. Thank you. But that was really fun to be away for many years and then come back to this new company and meet new dancers and then teach them my role that I made with Trisha and Carolyn and the dancers of my time. And the best sort of nugget that I take away from that is how, from a distance, if I haven't done it in a long time, it feels like I could never remember it, like it could ever happen again. But then stepping into it and moving into it, it's like learning or remembering the lyrics to an old song. It's like it's right there. And so then being able to translate that to another body. And I love what you said, just seeing it being worked through other people and their dynamic that's so similar but different and distinct. Yeah, it's really a rich experience.
I'm first thinking about, similar to what Mindy was saying about like entering a process, which I only was a part of the building of Lemoore, a little bit of I Love My Robots and some of the group work, but that same level of like, well, if it's coming out of my body and my offering, thinking how will anyone ever pick this up, and like, the micro rhythms and the orchestration and the movement of the focus and the same feeling that I have looking at either learning directly from another dancer or studying video and being like, how will I ever pick this up? But there's something about a common framework within our bodies and across our bodies that like the rhythms become so apparent, when you sort of like kind of mimic the momentum. You do look at your feet and say that one's left and that one's right, but somehow you just find yourself sort of falling through it and finding like all of this nuance that is like just the richness and the joy of the thing when you arrive. So I think about that on both sides of that, both in process and learning. But I've been talking a lot with the students I've been working with and just sort of filling them in a little bit about some of the like oral tradition of like passage through bodies, and there are these like constellations amongst us of like who we replaced, and sometimes we really kind of directly replaced a previous dancer who had this rich history and body knowledge, a living archive, and that passage is somewhat kind of firsthand, not even maybe secondary and so on, but like conversational, and so much of the refinement comes through the connection between the performers. And then these constellations sort of reach across works and across generations, and you find that you're actually like embodying 2.5 people over time. And it's such a responsibility because you become a holder, and the company is not shy to send an email or pick up the phone and ask for your knowledge of like, we know you carry this. Can you share it? We're reconstructing something.
All right. This is for Melinda. The unheard, unseen marching band is a key conceptual element of Foray Foray. How do you teach dancers to perform with a soundtrack that they can't hear, and what unique challenges does this present in a university setting?
Well, I hope you all are coming to the concert tomorrow night to see, but not see, the Hawkeye Marching Band, who are performing as a part of the restaging of Foray Foray, which was originally created in 1990. I think this marching band element, which is never seen but heard in the audience, plays a really unique role in this relationship between dance and music, historically speaking. Thinking about, and I know both of these choreographers really thought about how dance has its own essence, its own life, and then music can have its own life, and they can be next to each other and with each other, but they don't have to be integrated and dependent on each other. And so I think for a lot of the students are here. Thanks for being here. But I think for them and us in the restaging of it, it's so much about repetition and about sing-songing the rhythms of the dance and having the dance's sound and breath and timing be its own score, like time score, and trying to be as true to that as possible. And what I love about Trisha's work is that she is incredibly rhythmical and incredibly syncopated and full of these surprising ways of using time. And so I think supplementary to our choreography that we learned is this idea that we have to be stoic in our sense of time and we need to be committed to it, even when the band comes on the stage and is louder than anything any of these dancers have been with. It gets really loud. And so they brought up feeling like energized, and I remember that in performing the piece, that they come on stage and what you want to do is rev up and go faster and shorten and tighten, but instead we need to like stay calm, stay long, stay tall. And so I think that this is a really fun problem to be in, problem as a creative problem. Yeah, and I think that actually for this reason, when Aaron and I were talking with Jamie too about what piece would we do here, Foray was such the right choice because of this opportunity to work with the marching band and try on this creative problem, this particular creative problem.
Thank you. Tony, for In Plain Sight, it seemed to be a series about recontextualizing Trisha's work in new environments. How do you and the students decide which excerpts to use, and how does the specific site influence the choreography itself? Does the work change in this process?
This would be maybe even a better question for Carolyn, but I'm just gonna guess that like I think we're all speaking from love, what we love, what we remember, what stands out, what's so memorable about the larger choreographies in these excerpts and how these might emerge. And it's such a fun curatorial assignment to kind of look broadly across Trisha's work with an outside eye and be selective. And then, of course, these are like immersed in her earlier works, which are more dated, late 60s, early 70s, into maybe even early 80s. And I think that programming really matured personally from, when we were in the company, we presented a lot of early work, of the early works. And it was formatted a little differently. It was a little bit more compartmentalized and, in response to architectures and exhibitions. Not to say that I know Trisha has a really rich history of exploiting these kinds of spaces in really creative ways too, but In Plain Sight, I think bringing some of the choreographic work, the bigger choreographies and those excerpts forward, I was very moved. This is one of the first times I've experienced In Plain Sight, despite being able to be a thinker in that curatorial aim, and was so moved by that presentation. It was very, very new to me. Do you want to say any words about In Plain Sight?
Oh, yeah. I think it was nice to expand it, and I think we were really interested in moving, the intimacy of it. I think as dancers, we take for granted that we're standing 2 feet away from people moving all the time. And so there was sort of an idea to have the intimacy, but also travel a bit through spaces. And there are parts of Trisha's larger choreographies, like she crafted everything very carefully. So one excerpt that when I was proposing it, I was really had this excerpt in mind. It was a very sculptural duet, and I was like, this would be so beautiful in this context. And we only got to do it once because a lot of the excerpts are also designed for what can a dancer do on slate, concrete. What can a dancer do on a wood floor? What can a dancer do in the grass? What can a dancer do on a platform in the water? So yeah, it just was really fun making an inventory, and I'm looking forward to building the inventory back up again. And eventually we were able to do 2 complete works. One was called Geometry of Quiet, and another story. So they had a longer duration. But I think it's quite beautiful to see a little bit of a trajectory of where Trisha went in her career. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for that response. We're particularly happy also we should drop a name for Kyle Marshall, who is also in residence with us as the Grantwood Fellow, who also danced for Trisha Brown. So all of these really beautiful moments are coming together in a really, really big way. And so we're excited to have all these knowledges and these bodies present with us, for sure. Did you have something, Andrea? No, next question is for you. When you reset a work, is the goal replication, interpretation? How much room is there for the individual student's artistry to come through? And where do you draw the line to preserve the integrity of the original?
You know how to ask a question and like put 3 in there. So every staging is a little different. I can talk about Travelogue maybe. So this, digging into Merce's steps and the timing of a piece and seeing if you can retrieve as much as you can from the archival footage, and if Merce's notes have any information to extract. So that's where you begin, like this sort of, and I would say that even in a piece that I danced, that's still where you want to go and start again. So my take in restaging the work is, even though I performed biped many, many, many times, when Jamie and I reconstructed it, we went back and we sort of learned it again and studied it again. But Travelogue was all new. So I think trying to find the rhythm, the steps that Merce was making, because his work is incredibly musical as well, based in rhythm and based in time. So sections there will be actual sections, and there will be a length of time. So sort of figuring that out, and oftentimes they're in Merce's notes or whatever, so that structure of time is also holding the space. It's like the container for that section, and will help guide the steps in how fast or slow they are. So all of that happens, and then you have to bring it to a set of dancers, right? So Merce gave us a lot of space to find ourselves, and I think that that's an important part of the restaging. But like I said, it depends, because if you have professionals who have done the work before, that space can maybe be a little broader. You know, I think for students, the interpretation maybe comes a little later in the process, right? Because it's still specific in the spine, and how we do a triplet is still very specific. So it's a balancing act. And then I'll just add, like with Travelogue, all of the archival footage was very hard to see. It was all black and white. There's only one video that actually has the end of the dance. So my colleague and I, when we were figuring this out, when we were sort of bringing it back, because it was performed in the 70s, like for 2 years, 77 to 79, and then it wasn't performed again. So we thought we had the whole dance, and then I was like, Marcy, have you looked at this video? There's like 2 more minutes of this dance. Our production person didn't even know like the ending of the dance, because he hadn't seen this video. So, and interestingly, with Travelogue, the premiere video, so from the first year, there's a whole section that got changed in the beginning. So Marcy and I had to be like, well, let's do the second version, because that's where Merce landed. So So we had to make some choices. There's this process of making choices, and all I'll say, and I feel like I'm just going around in a circle, is that every time you go back to a dance, and if you're lucky enough to get to stage it a second time, you see more, and you get closer to it. And if you're lucky enough to stage it 4 times, you're like, whoa, how did I not see that before, right? So, and sometimes dancers discover things as well, as they should, so.
Right on. Thanks for that. We talk about briefly the complications or the beauty of taking Merce's work and setting it on the Trisha Brown Dance Company? I'd love to hear about, because I know that for those who don't know, there's a technical difference in how they move. I won't go into it yet, but yeah.
It was wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. This company is very versatile. So they actually most of them have all had experience with the Cunningham technique and have done some of our stagings and workshops. So coming into this particular company at this moment, it felt very natural. And Marcy and I had staged it. So we pulled it out, we did a workshop, and then we were able to stage it on the UNCSA dancers, so students. And we figured out what those limitations might have been. And then we got this opportunity to do it on a professional company. And it's really interesting because most companies that are doing Merce's work are ballet companies right now. And so it was actually so refreshing to get to work with modern dancers who use their back, know how to use their back in a particular way. So I don't know, it was incredibly easy. It was really fun. Yeah, we had a great time, and we have a good relationship with these dancers, so it's in such good hands.
Do you have any thoughts, Carolyn, to add? What is it like to see the process?
In the back of the room.
Well, I'm always giggling in the back of the room because the choreography is hilarious.
It's hilarious.
I mean, I was like, what? Every time I'm just like laughing.
Well,
It's
this
like-
is how we knew it worked. You would be in the room and you'd be giggling, and Marcy would be like, yes, we're doing it right, because it's subtle, too. Like, you have to
Yeah.
be careful with the
Yeah.
humor.
But yeah, and I can say I would not, as a dancer in 1984, I would not have been able to do what our dancers are doing now. And it's such an interesting shift in how dancers have to be very versatile to keep working and earning a living. And so, but it's really wonderful to see the dancers celebrating both works, and they do them both really beautifully. So,
For Mindy or Tony, I have a question. When we're thinking about what to pass on to the next generation of dancers, what from the knowledges that you've gained from Trisha Brown is a part of the legacy that you're attempting to pass on to our dancers here? And how do you go about doing that? How do you go about selecting the ideas, the principles, the embodied knowledge that's valuable in passing on to our dancers?
What comes to mind is just to be thinking bodies in the space and feeling bodies. And my teaching, I find myself trying to call out the body as an entire just topography of like, feel that and feel this, and just to illuminate the whole experience. And I think that sometimes it can be our relationship to dance can, and its technicality, kind of bypass a lot of sensation. And then with that sort of like building that skill set of a really sort of illuminated body, then you have like space to really address the mind and thinking while dancing as well, and really devoting the sort of movement of thought with the movement of the body. And I really enjoyed having that space, having danced in other work and other companies prior to Trisha. There's some sort of, despite all of its rigor, an ability to care for your body in real time. And I went from being a real nervous performer, despite loving it, to being a lot more conscious on stage in a way that was really thrilling and sort of set me up even for, my own art making.
And what is that art making?
Do we get to ask you questions?
No.
Oh yeah, I'm very inspired by the artists that I worked for. I worked for Trisha Brown and Shen Wei, primarily, and a few other choreographers, Jack Ferver, John Jaspers, Faye Driscoll. I just love, I'm talking about my work, but I want to talk about, I loved, as a dancer, I kind of see myself still as a dancer, but it's confusing. I loved walking into a space where all of the rules changed, that I had to completely redesign my understanding, and and Trisha's work is very much based in a lot of systems and parameters, so I have an affinity for that. But for me, it was about just the about change, like just completely different rules. Shen Wei, it's like the center moves, it goes to the distal, and you absorb that energy back into the body. Trisha Brown, the distal pulls the center off of its center, and just trying to figure that out, and the results of just, the epiphany in that space of like a whole new vocabulary, a whole new quality can be born, and then you can change outfits, you can try on Cunningham and then come back to Brown.
Yeah, I think my takeaway that I try to bring into the studio when I'm teaching is something about multiple points of attention, and that I learned that right away when I tried my first Trisha Brown phrase in an audition, in fact, and that's a phrase that is in 4A, which is kind of fun and full circle. But I remember learning that phrase and being like, I've never done anything like this, and I can't have one point of attention at any point. I have to have multiple points of attention or areas of attention that have to do with space, have to do with balance or falling or reaching or extending all at once. And that is true about movement in general, right? Attention is hard to gauge, but I learned how to pay a lot of attention by practicing Trisha's work. And not even nameable attention, but really getting into my physicality and my movement potential with a deeper sense of embodying it. So I'm trying to find ways to encourage us to notice where our attention is in the first place. And then once we can kind of find that, where else can we be? Like, how else can we be with ourselves and our movement? To what degree can we know more about that rhythm and more about my weight and more about the space and know exactly this is how close I am to Carolyn. And then I have a parched mouth, right? Like, just how much can I pay attention to at once? Because that makes it even just that much more alive, right? And I think, lastly, a big takeaway that I've really experienced with this 4A project is that it's all about rehearsal. Actually, like, that's where it's at. Like, rehearsal is the place where it is at. And after touring for a long time and loving being on stage, it's so much more about the time you spend building and learning and deepening and being together. And it's so fun to share with all of you in an audience. Please keep coming, and of course we will be there on stage. But actually, it's about that process and the presence of that process. And I think that's true about class. I think that's true about training. I think it's true about being in the studio. And sometimes I think we go to the studio kind of waiting for it to be over so I can get on the stage, and as young dancers. And I think I keep saying, like, well, here we are again. Like, this is where we are again. And so we have to enliven our attention to this particular space because it is where it's at.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Completely agree. Yay.
There seems to be agreement amongst us. This question is for both Andrea and Carolyn. Both Merce and Trish famously collaborated with visual artists like Robert Rauschenberg. When restaging these works, how do you manage the legacy of the visual design alongside the choreography? And how integral are those original designs to the identity of the piece? I can do that again if I need to. I love a 3-part question.
It's probably the same. We could probably do it in unison.
But
You go ahead. I mean, definitely with like Rauschenberg's set, we definitely try to keep it exactly the same. There's no, I mean, I can't think of a reason to make any shift. It's such a total part of everything, so integrated. Did that answer the question, or was there a second question?
That answered the question for sure. The last part of that, if one cared to take it forward, is how integral are these original designs to the identity of the work? Which you answered.
Well, I think the two of them made it in tandem. They were playing off each other. So like with Set and Reset, Trisha was working the perimeter choreographically, using the transitions from this side of the stage to the next as a conveyor belt for duets and trios, and had, just to say a few of the rules, like she gave the dancers 5 rules when they were doing a structured improvisation, and one of them was visibility and invisibility, and act on instinct. And you know, Bob came into the studio, he saw all this like commotion, and they get it, they get each other. And so he created the transparent wings, that is a play on the proscenium itself, but also highlighting something that Trisha was interested in. I mean, so I feel like that it's a duet, the set and the choreography.
Set Reset is the most beautiful thing that has ever been made. And often I tell students that nothing good has been made after Set Reset, so we can all just stop making dances.
I mean,
to their
it is.
dismay, when I say this, they look like mortified that I would say that. I say, like, what about your work? I said, nothing good has been made since Set Reset. So I feel very strongly about it.
Is a masterwork, yeah. So there's a real separation in Merce's work between the dance and the decor and the music. Rauschenberg there was more of a collaborative element in some of these works, especially the ones that had, if you have a prop that you have to dance with, you have to know how to use it. So that's atypical of Merce's work. There's a few other pieces like Biped, where there are 5 doors in the back, and Merce knew that, and so in the choreographic process, in the building of the piece, those were entrances and exits because he knew that about the decor. But yeah, I think for Travelogue, Robert Kovich has can pants on when he's jumping, and that's integral, right? But more often than not, they were working in separation from each other. The artists were, all of them, in Merce's work. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, but that was something really part of the process with Cage and...
Is that you come
yeah.
together at the end, and these things coexist at the end. So it wasn't always that way, and I do know that, I believe that Rauschenberg, in those early years was sort of stirring the pot backstage and doing things. So there was definitely more of a relationship there, and I don't want to speak towards that too much because I don't know exactly, but I do know that that challenge still existed, that they didn't know what each other was going to do and all the pieces. Again, Travelogue feels like an exception to what it usually is.
Trisha feel about that level of chance? Did she confront that at all in her collaborations?
You gotta ask it out.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm so curious.
No, you can ask it. Don't you?
Oh,
Ask it out
in the
loud.
microphone.
Yeah.
Carolyn, do you have any sense of how Trisha felt about that approach? If she worked with chance in that way, or if there was more dialogue?
With her,
for example, or
uh,
Cage and Rauschenberg.
well, I know that she was deeply, inspired by Cage,
Yeah.
and but I would say, like, I think that they were too smitten with each other. So, I was almost about to say, for astral, convertible, or converted, but the origin story is that Therese Barbanel, our European booking agent, was like, if you could do something outdoors, we could get the company booked in all these outdoor festivals, but there are not a lot of lights or this or that. And Trisha, I think, originally went and said, can you make me some sort of blow up set or something? And he was like, but had the idea of having the towers, which hold music and lights, and the dancers' movement triggers them. So there's an element of chance, but I don't feel like it's exactly the same. There's still a structure. But I mean, that's the beauty also of these different relationships. They're different, but they're so incredibly rich. And I think one thing I know is that Bob loved to problem solve. So I think that you could see that in probably both places. He would get into it, so.
Right on. Both techniques are notoriously known to be very specific. I always, as an unauthorized user, I always ask students to be courageous and specific with their usage of the Cunningham technique. And so I imagine the same thing is also for Trisha Brown's practice. Where do you see the university's role in technical practice and pushing it forward in relationship to the work of the trust or in relationship to Trisha Brown's company?
It's a bit of a pipeline for us now because we don't have a dance company and we do have open classes, but having teachers in universities teaching the technique and building relationships in educational settings is really imperative, that these dancers can then come and do our workshops or move into companies and they've had some sort of experience with the technique or the work. And I always find that if you're doing a staging, to build in classes with that staging or be able to put that into your rehearsal just to give everybody some, it's not only just the language, but it's also stamina is so essential. Yeah, I'm good.
I think Mindy and Tony fill in, but Trisha does not have a codified technique, and so each individual that's danced in the company has their warm-up that they try and share or their way of trying to prepare. But one of the beautiful things about this reconstruction of 4A is that we all learn the work through the repertory, and Trisha changed her language every single piece, even within a cycle. So it's like, I mean, sometimes she would take a move from a piece before so you would know the move, but she was really creating unique material on the spot. And it's just like endless amounts of, she calls it vocabulary. And so I think it's so important to have this licensing project so the students can experience learning the phrase material and then how, and there's differences even within the phrase material, wild differences. And so, and then understanding the choreography and her process too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have a responsibility toward these choreographers in dance departments across the nation. I think that, and among many others, right? Like I think, especially when artists have passed, and it will, over time, continue to be harder and harder to find the embodied practitioners who have the languages in their bodies to share. It will live on through students, and it must. So, yeah, I think it's a fun moment, at least for University of Iowa. This is an incredible moment for us to have you here and have the students be in classes and see in plain sight and perform Floor of the Forest and perform for a, that will go on with them as one of those really, big moments. It sure is for me in this moment as a professor here now. But yeah, I'm already thinking about how do we continue this? Like where does it live? Is it in the classroom or is it only in restaging opportunities? And how do companies have to maybe become more flexible too in order to let that disseminate more and more regarding licensing and opportunities for students to have engagement with it? Because I know that is tricky for some schools to be able to afford the licensing and the guest artists and whatnot. But yeah, I try to keep some of it in my own class, but it's also, it's the work, like you say. It's practicing the work to be a part of that movement language, so.
Can I follow up? Knowing that there is, that although Trisha doesn't have a technique per se, but there is an aesthetic. There is a quality, there's a sensibility, there's a logic to the movement that you know when you see it, and you know when people are not in it, and when they do. At least it seems like from the outside that I know. Could anyone speak to that, or correct me, or give me some clarification?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The word vocabulary is standing out to me, and I think that's the major lifeline of the work and a responsibility toward it. And I also think about how the work is, both of these works really can be sort of trans-vocabulary, and it's an opportunity for us to meet our students and what their interests are and what their vocabularies are, because of the way these two artists work with structure and concepts for the body. And so while like the actual vocabulary of the movement can bring so much insight and expand our practice and awareness and all the different eclectic ways we're learning dance, I think about the fun of applying some of the structures, and I feel like this Floor of the Forest project was an opportunity to do that, and it felt like a risk for me to really promote that the visual artists and our dancers could both have access to this work and find success in it. And there are some sort of slight accommodations, I think, in the way that I restaged it, but the purity of the concept and how to engage the work, I think, is crystal clear. It feels like a success. And from the visual art side, watching these performers, and every time the dancers, I just would, for fun, call them performers, just to be more inclusive. And I watched both their fear transform into confidence and the devotion on the visual artist side to this work and this process. I got kind of cornered today. They were en masse saying, "What's next? We want more." Really, and starting today into tomorrow, really set the work free. They are maintaining the set. They know all the rules, and this idea of specificity, I watched them watching the company members perform Floor of the Forest, and I could see the same process we experience in the studio of like questions of like, wait, can we do that? Is that a part of it? What's inbounds and out of bounds inside of the like liberation of exploring the concept? All these questions, and I was like, they're coming for me tomorrow. Can I do this? Are we allowed to do that? Thanks.
That's fun.
I feel like you were going to say something really earth-moving.
Oh, no, I was just saying, that's fun, Tony.
Well, we're probably at time. It's time to wrap up. But we want to thank each and all of our panelists for contributing their information and just being on campus with us. We really appreciate you and the legacies that you're carrying in your bodies and in the licensing and just in the world. We're really thankful. And on behalf of Hampshire and the dance department and our chair, Jennifer Kale, we really thank you for coming. We can't emphasize that enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We thank you.
I want to thank you too, Chris. I think we all know and understand your deep affinity for both of these artists and their legacies and their repertories. You're so knowledgeable. You've written on behalf of this work in many times in many ways. So thank you for your leadership today, and I want you all to know that.